So that's, I mean, a multinational corporation is a U.S. corporation, typically incorporated in Delaware for state tax reasons and state legal structure reasons, with ownership of multiple corporations, Mexico, Brazil, India, China, wherever, around the world. So you can have the very large multinationals like General Electric and IBM. They have literally hundreds of CFCs. That's at the extreme. Okay, the next one is action to limit the interest deductions in high tax countries. Well, what is that? That's the U.S. 35%. When a parent company takes, when it borrows in the U.S. bond market, it can deduct that interest as an expense from its gross income on the way to getting taxable income. There are a lot of other deductions, but that's an important one. And it may use those funds to support these CFCs spread around the world. If you take away that deduction, because the money is used for those CFCs in Indonesia or wherever, France, Britain, they would be disadvantaged, because if you take a UK corporation where the rate, I think the corporate rate is now something like 16 or 20%, they would lose a 20% deduction. The US firm lose a 35% deduction. Obviously, it's worse off. Next troublesome one, prevent treaty abuse. Now, this is pretty, I know this this is time to go to sleep or go back to get the second dessert or whatever. Maybe the glass of wine that Ken is providing. Is that true, Ken? Glass of wine later. There are a lot of tax treaties around the world. The U.S. has about, I believe it's about 60. I may be wrong on the count. But other countries have a lot of other tax treaties. So if you take so-called double tax treaties, the acronym being DTT, there are about 3,000 around the world. The U.S. is not a big double tax treaty country. And in particular, we don't have many tax treaties with what used to be called or are still called developing countries. Why not? Well, there are a lot of reasons for that. We're not so willing to give them benefits that, say, France or Germany would give them. And there are other reasons as well. But we don't have a big inventory of treaties with these developing countries, which are 190 countries in the world, so say 30 of them are developed and 160 are not. So what our companies do, US-based multinationals, they may have a subsidiary based in Indonesia, which is in turn owned by a subsidiary based in Hong Kong. So it's a second-tier subsidiary. And operating in Indonesia, it wants to take the benefit of the, hypothetically, the Hong Kong-Indonesia tax treaty. Well, what the OECD is trying to say is that, this company is based in the US, ultimately, when you go up through the tiers. The US does not have a tax treaty with Indonesia. This company should not be able to take advantage of those provisions. The language is the principal purpose test that's been invented by the OECD. Well, if you go to that, if you did that, US companies, they couldn't take advantage of these tax treaties between third countries. And the US is not suddenly going to negotiate a lot of treaties. So that would be very unfortunate. The analogy, which is easier to understand if you come from a trade orientation, is rules of origin. I mean, I think it's generally understood that rules of origin are rules of protection. That's what they are. And they're not basically intended to stop trade deflection. They're mainly basically intended so that the U.S. apparel, textile firms can sell their textiles to Mexico Vietnam, and so forth. Well, that's what this would be, a kind of a rules of origin with tax treaties, which would greatly limit the use, not a step in the right direction. Okay, this other one is even more weedy. Avoidance of permanent establishment status. Here's the basic idea. A firm based in the US which just opens, just is selling into a foreign country where it doesn't have a subsidiary. It's just selling into that country. And it may have an agent there, but it stops short of having the kind of base which would give it this term permanent establishment. It's an old term that goes back to the 1920s or 30s. And it's well defined now in law, in international tax agreements, which stands for international law in this area. Well, what BEPS wants to do is expand this concept of PE status. What does that mean in real terms? What it means in real terms is that a company which sells a lot of stuff on consignment to countries around the world is suddenly going to be exposed to corporate taxation in those countries. Right now, the permanent establishment is the threshold at which the company is subject to corporate taxation in that country. So again, to bring it down to something which is maybe a little more familiar, when you travel to, UK and you give a speech, as Steve often does, and he gets paid $1,000, maybe that's not enough, 10,000, where does it start? If he's only there for 2 days, he doesn't get taxed. He hasn't been there long enough to be subject to the individual income tax in the UK. This permanent establishment concept is the same for a company. It's not there in a big enough presence. Once you pass that threshold, you could be subject to lots of taxes. Now, how does that matter in today's world? In today's world, the biggest growth in international economy in terms of percentage rates, not dollar volume, is the digital economy. The OECD wants to extend the PE status to digital sales. Now just think what that means. So not only consignment agents who are maybe real people, they'll suddenly be thought of as corporate ones, but also digital sales. So, boy, that's a big expansion. Okay. Then we have 3. I'm going to stop here so this is all people can digest. Are you still awake? Wait until we. Okay. Actions 8, 9, and 10 deal with the so-called transfer pricing guidelines. Again, it's at what price do corporations sell between themselves? And a good 1/3 of trade is intra-corporate trade in the world today. And a good half of trade, or maybe even 60% of trade, is trade between corporations and other firms where there might be a transfer pricing issue. It's really difficult to determine what a transfer price, the proper transfer price is for a unique product, and what is really unique, intellectual property of all kinds. Almost by definition, it's unique. But also medical equipment, which is only made by one company, components of it. There was a session this morning with Medtronics. They have a lot of specialized medical equipment. I don't think there's any benchmark price you can get for a lot of the stuff they make. So that's an issue. Now, what the BEPS folk want to do is revisit the transfer pricing rules to recharacterize the prices for especially intangible assets. That's the intellectual property. That's the part that has come in on countries which are using BEPS, because they're saying that a U.S. subsidiary based in France, which is getting royalties on its intellectual property income from Morocco or wherever, we're going to reprice that. Have a new, use the special measures and various kinds of capitalization rules and get more tax out of you. And that's what finally awaken the Senate to the problems here. So for reason of time, I'm not going to go through the harmless suggestions. There are some that are harmless, and there are some that are actually useful, and I'll be happy to talk about those in the question period. But at this point, I think I'll stop and thank you.